When I did my 2000 subscriber special Q&A, I answered a very personal question where I said I have one hand, and there were a couple of people who reacted to that, and the obvious question was, how the hell do you actually play like that? And therefore in this video I'm gonna show you how I personally use a mouse and a keyboard, what settings I changed to make movement feel natural in CS. So I would say let's get right into the video, but first, as always, the video is sponsored by SkinBaron, the ultimate marketplace for buying and selling your CS skins. SkinBaron is a German company with an excellent Trustpilot rating, trusted by thousands of players. Save up to 30% compared to the Steam market with over 1 million skins and easy to use filters. Finding your perfect skin is a breeze. They offer multiple payment methods including credit card, Klarna and even more. And if you're selling a skin worth over 1,000 euros, you'll only pay 2% fees on it. Use my code Shifterz to support the channel and start your SkinBaron journey today. Thank you SkinBaron, and now back to the video. So let's quickly give you a recap of what I said in the Q&A. So I was born without a right hand, and over my whole life I've been playing video games. I started with consoles, playing on a controller, and around 2016-15 I switched over to PC because some friends wanted to play Counter-Strike, and I haven't looked back since. Back then I was using WASD like anyone else. However, buttons like the shift key or anyone that is further away from WASD I couldn't really press on the keyboard. Therefore I had two extra buttons on my mouse, and I used them either to have a sprint button on it or a talk button on it. So obviously a big problem that I had, anything that was far away from the movement keys I couldn't really press. So I was basically restricted to a 3x3 radius of buttons. So 1 to 3 Q, W, E, A, S, D. Those were the buttons that I was able to press with relative ease, and everything else required me to completely readjust my arm placement, meaning I couldn't do anything in game. I was basically a sitting duck waiting to get killed by someone. Therefore, for a long time when it came to throwing nades, I was using the mouse wheel. However, as anyone knows, that isn't really a good method, and plus when it came to jumping I also couldn't do that properly. Therefore my mouse wheel up was my jump button. About 2 years ago I would say, I was slowly getting fed up that I couldn't really do a couple of specific movements. For example, do proper counter strafing in both directions. My movement in general didn't really feel that smooth, and I wanted to improve it. That is why I have switched up my movement from WASD to WEAS, which gave me way better movement in all of the directions. And now my use key, so the E button, which is normally the default one, is now the D button. And crouching is also a very important thing, and that is my Q button. Since I can press that, I cannot really do a crouch move in the right direction, so that is currently the only limitation I have. However, at the moment it isn't really limiting my gameplay, I would say. Then another thing that I've also got myself is a footpad, since I use that, for example, to cycle nades, or now what is a new thing that I have is switch between follow recoil on and follow recoil off. And when it comes to nades, I've also improved. Yes, I have the footpad as I've just said. However, the tab button is my flash, and the caps lock button is now my nade button. Number 4 is my molotov, and my smoke button is next to the Y key, which is the greater than and smaller than button. However, nevertheless, I stick to the cycle buttons, since some of them in the heat of the moment I don't really think of them. However, I would say the two most useful ones, the nade and the flash one, are the ones that I actually use fairly frequently. And for the last buttons that I use a lot is 2, 1 and 3. 2 is my main gun, 1 is my secondary, and 3 is my knife. And I have that set up since 2 is the most important one that I need to have, since it's my primary gun and it's the easiest one to access, and the knife the second most important for me. And I don't really get to the point where I pull out my secondary a lot. That is why I have it on 1, since I don't really have to use it a lot. However, if I need to reach my secondary for a specific reason, I can also just scroll down on my mouse wheel. Then one thing you have maybe noticed is that I have built a contraption to raise my arm a bit so I can actually reach the keys. And to be honest, it's a very simple, stupid contraption that I've built. It's a couple of tissue papers stacked up together to raise up my elbow so I can press the buttons without interacting with any unwanted buttons that I don't want to click. And for the last part, I'm gonna answer a couple of questions that some people ask me fairly frequently. The first one is, why don't I use my left hand as my keyboard hand? However, you've seen how it looks. I cannot use a mouse with that. That is why it is way easier to use my right hand as my keyboard hand. Then a question I also get a lot is, why why not stick to a controller since it has less input buttons? And while that is true, and I'm also used to playing with a controller, to be honest, I don't want to give up the advantages a mouse gives you for aiming. That is why I want to stick to a mouse and keyboard layout. And another question I also got a lot in real life was, why not just use the arrow keys? Since they are not in the middle of the keyboard, you have to lift up your arm and they're way easier to reach. Yes, that is true. However, if you look at your arrow keys, you will see they are spaced out. All of the other surrounding keys are not there. And as I've told you at the beginning, I use more than just the movement keys with my right hand, which means I will actually lose a couple of buttons that I cannot press anymore, and I actually have to find out complete new tactics for them. And I don't want to do that, and it feels like I have found the best option for me right now. So if you have any further questions, how I play or anything else, you can write them down in the comments. Be respectful, obviously, and I will try to answer them as best as possible. And as always, don't forget about a giveaway here on YouTube and on Discord. Everything relevant is in the description below. And now don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys on the next one.